Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the Low-Code Cafe, episode 75. Today, we'll be covering a very interesting topic, which is handling a large amount of tasks, and with a particular example of sending a large number of emails and how to develop a pattern to make that task that doesn't overload the server, doesn't overload the email server, and things like that through queues. But before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Bogdan Litescu. I'm the founder and CEO of Plant an App. And this event is something that we are doing every Wednesday, same day, same hour at 10 a.m. Central US time. And it's a community event. It's a technical event. We get technical content such as news about the upcoming releases, and also we get to do a hands-on part, learning from our support center, from the tickets that come up and their resolution. But also the largest chunk, it's usually as a very specific topic, like today, it's about implementing a queue pattern. This webinar is being recorded. All past edition, all 74 past edition, plus a lot more videos that are very good for training are on our YouTube channel. So make sure to visit, subscribe to, and browse to get valuable insights into how to achieve various things. Each of these videos also has in the description, it has bookmarks, so you don't have to watch to the full hour of every video, but you can jump directly to the section that is of interest. Cool. So that being said, our agenda for today, I will be giving you a bit of updates about the upcoming release 119. Afterwards, we'll hear the stories from the trenches with Dale, our head of support. And finally, he will continue with the presentation for the queue pattern. Cool. So let's begin. I only have a couple of minor updates for today. One is we published 4 new hotfixes, and we've also standardized this to do it every Tuesday. So every Tuesday, you'll be seeing new hotfixes coming out. Of course, unless it's a critical thing that probably it will be hotfixed right away. And in these hotfixes, we fixed the advanced settings button under the gear icon was not visible if the person had both the admin role and the low-code developer role. Of course, it happened only for a small category of people, but it prevented the persona bar from being able to open, which would result in not being able to add, for example, modules to the page. So that has been fixed already. Also, there was an item that went back and forth for a while, the portal settings token, to be able to access the custom settings that are in the database. So the built-in settings were working all along, but if you had custom setting in this table, this stopped working around 2 versions ago. So that has been hotfixed and it's available for download. Next one, we did all the revamp in the admin UIs in last release in 118, but we missed some places in the workflow action settings. So that had a couple of UI glitches, especially around the icons. Those have been fixed, and the action settings inside workflows have been aligned with the rest of the admin interfaces. And finally, we had an issue when indexing a large number of URLs in the search engine. And I'm talking in the thousands, in the tens of thousands of URLs. And that has been optimized in order to look better at the dates when the content changed, in order to avoid parsing content that wasn't new. So that improved a lot. So now it works smoothly. So these are the hotfixes already available. And another small update, 119 is coming up at the end of this month. I've mentioned about it last week as well. It's a major revamp on the front-end side this time, so we are doing a lot of polishing. And we push the beta date for 2 days. During that week, there's a national holiday in the development office in Bucharest, in Romania. So then just to account for the days off, we push the beta date from Wednesday to Friday. We are keeping the same release date, so the pressure will be on the community to move faster, and of course on our team to support that. So that's these are the updates on the product side, and if there are no questions, I will take it to Dale to give us the stories from the trenches this week.
Great. Hello, everyone. Let me get my screen share going here. And I just want to point out, I have already posted on the chat the links that might be of use to you for this episode. So for those that are still on the fence looking at licensing Plant and App, there's a link to Chad Weiss to get a discount from converting from our DNN Sharp tools to Plant and App. Also, on Fridays, we run the Low-Code Campfire, which is far more interactive. It's a meeting format, so you get a chance to ask questions and help your fellow Plant and App campfire join around the campfire for that. So please sign up for that one if you're inclined. That happens this same hour on Fridays. And then we have the link to our recordings, our webinar feedback form. We would love to hear any feedback you have, ways that we can make this event better. And finally, our community portal, which is where a lot of great questions get answered by our community as well. So that's on the clipboard. And then some things, just a couple of topics from the trenches. As Bogdan mentioned, we have a number of hotfixes that were published. These are to the version 1.18. And he mentioned this particular one. I thought it'd be fun to visualize it. But when you're working in workflows and adding actions to execute actions, instead of seeing icons over here, we were seeing words over here. So this is just it wasn't broken functionality, but it was kind of inconvenient, and so that's available as a hotfix. And I thought it'd be useful just to take a look at if you go into the Plant and App configuration and go to the updates, you can find all the hotfixes here, and you can see them, install them, and get that benefit. So for example, this one is tagged as workflows. Let's see, where did that go? Workflows. So the one that if you're experiencing that one that I mentioned, you can install this one. These have all been tested by our QA department, and you're welcome to install any that impact you, and really any of them. And they will be part of our next product release, version 1.19. So any installs that you do and testing that you do, it just helps make the product better. Great. So that's installing updates. And then within another question that's just come up on the community forum had to do with HTML Sanitize. And this was a client that became aware that the class was being sanitized out of input. So if you have an input field, and this is something that we did like more than a year ago, version 1.8, but we do a lot of sanitizing of the input so that you can't, for example, pass on a script. By default, you can't pass a script through an input form and get it to run, and a variety of other things. And there was one of the things that we do is strip out if you have a class on any HTML tags that are being entered in the form. And so it caused this particular client an issue. And there is an easy workaround. You can uncheck that if it's safe for you. You can uncheck that characteristic, the secure input characteristic, on the field, and it'll allow it to pass through. And then we provide the HTML sanitize action so that you can sanitize it a little bit more fine-tuned. But our default is to try and keep it very restricted so that your input is secure against potential users that are trying to hack through. So that is the For the Trenches segment today. On our hands-on low coding, we'll just dive right in to this topic using the queue design pattern for reliability and handling large number of records. So I thought I would just start by introducing the topic. And so one of them is one piece of this. I'm going to focus a lot on emails today, but towards the end we'll talk about some other ways that this pattern can be used, and hopefully you'll generate some questions. And so feel free to use the questions or the Q&A chat along the way to if you have any. So almost all of you, I would assume, are familiar with the send email action. Send email action lets you put in who an email is from, who it's to, the subject, the body. You can compose a very custom email, send it out. And this is a very common use for our product. You have a form, somebody pushes the submit button, and one of the actions might be to send an email to somebody. So it's very easy to use and configure, and you can use it right at the point where you need it to be. But if you're designing a bigger system, you might want to consider more of a queue pattern instead of doing it where it's needed. So, for example, if you have you might have a system where you've got an invoice system that sends emails to clients, a lead form that's sitting out on your website that when they fill it out, it sends an email to the visitor. You might have an administration system that sends email to staff, a monitoring system that alerts administrators that something's gone wrong. And so you get into a situation where all of your email actions are spread out through your system, which is a perfectly reasonable design pattern. But if you want to get some additional benefits, like queuing the emails, having them happen one at a time, or some other benefits, we'll run through those, and then just organizing them into one place so that you can see them and work with them and see what happened, then you might want to use a queue pattern. So an alternate look at this would be that you take all of those same things, and instead of directly sending out the emails, you put them into a queue. So just have an entity, a database table that has all the information that needs to be sent, and then you would have an email. Once you have them all in a queue, or as they go into a queue, you would have some kind of a process that would handle them in a standard way. So it would actually send the email, handle errors, notify administrators if there's problems, that kind of thing. So that's the pattern that we're going to talk about today, gathering them all up into one place and then sending them. So the benefits of using an email queue: you have centralized logic. Instead of having the email logic sent out, distributed all throughout your application, it's all in one place, and you have a standard way to deal with email. If you're sending out a large number of emails, one of the benefits is that you can prioritize items, and we'll be touching on that today, that you can assign a priority and then send the high priority things first and low priority things as you get time to it. And it allows you to deal with things in the right order, and maybe it's to your benefit to space them out a little bit. So that's a benefit. And then having an email queue lets you look at and see these emails. They can each have a status. They can start out as a draft and then be pending, ready to send. You can actually send them, show them as sent, or see an error. You can see what happened to each email. And then it also will give you the ability to resend if something goes wrong or needs to be corrected, whether it's a problem on the SMTP server or a problem with the values of the email, like a bad email address or something like that. And then another benefit is a historical record. You can, by it, when you send an email through an action that's distributed all throughout your application, perhaps you don't, once the email goes, you don't, I mean, the event has happened, the email is gone, but you may or may not have a record of that unless you sent a copy to yourself, and then it's just in your mailbox someplace. By doing it this way, you'll have a historical record of everything that you've sent for as long as you want to keep it. And then in the way that I'm going to demonstrate this pattern today, we're also going to see some other benefits. So we'll be using email templates, which allows for centralized administration of what your emails say. And we'll also get into token expansion so that your emails can have variables that get replaced as they're being sent. So that's a lot to bite off, but we've got 40 minutes. We can do a lot in 40 minutes. So the first thing that we're going to do is develop some entities. There's going to be an entity for templates and an entity for emails. And so we're going to have fields like from and to email, the CC, BCC, subject, body, and priority. That's what we're going to use to put things in order. And then I'm going to get this up on my other screen so I can keep track of it as we're going here. For the templates, we're going to give them a name just for convenience. But for the actual emails, we're going to keep track of what the source is, the status, and the error information. So these are the two entities we're going to develop here right now, and then we'll see how to work with them. So let's get started. I'm going to go into configuration. We have this is a brand new Plantain app application. Except that I've added a couple of things, a couple of entities, which we'll get into later, and that was just to save just a couple of minutes time today. But mostly we'll be developing it fresh. So the first one we're going to do is create an entity called, and I'm going to add a namespace. We're going to call this Q email, and this is just for organization purposes. But we're going to have Q email, and the first, so we'll select that, and then the first entity we're going to create is going to be called the Q email. So this is the thing that's going to hold our what the email that we're going to send is, and allow for centralized administration. So the properties for that are going to be all the ones that I just mentioned. It's going to have a name, and that will be text. It will, and we'll let that be our display name as well. So then we're going to have a from email, and I'm saying from email. From is sometimes can be a reserved word in SQL, so I'm going to explicitly say from email so that it's not anything that's going to cause us issues if we ever try and use it with SQL. And this is going to be an email address. Actually, no, I'm going to just leave this as text, and this will be for this is on our template, so we can leave it be text to email CC BCC subject body. And the body needs to be able to a large text so we can handle a lot of information for as long as it for large emails. And then we're going to do a priority. Priority is going to be a integer. So this is going to be, the idea here is it's priority is going to be 0 is going to be a low priority, 9 will be a high priority. So we'll do that. And see, I like to make things searchable so we can find them in the template. And a few things maybe could be useful to be filterable. For example, a couple things like that. And I like to make most things sortable. we need to sort by body, but we could sort by most of the rest of these. And so we'll save that entity and let that build. And then we're going to do the same thing, about the same thing, except we'll have source status and error information as part of our Q email entity. So we'll build that one as well. So this will also be in the Q email namespace. And this is going to be Q email. And so we'll do our names here. So we'll do a source, text, status, and this could really be a status entity, but I'm just going to keep it simple and do text today. And then our info, which will make this be a large text, so in case the message gets large. And then our other fields, so from so body again is needs to be large text, and the priority will make that be an integer so it all matches up. And we'll pick the, doesn't matter, we'll pick the source as our display property. We have to pick something. So for those of you who have built 100 entities, I apologize for making you go through that, but it's helpful to have these all be self-contained, so somebody coming back later on can take a look and know exactly how to make this happen. So we have two entities, and the Q email template is where we're going to start. And the idea is that, and I'm going to go to that page. The idea is that we'll create an email template that instead of sending email directly in the product, we'll send it from we'll send the template, say send this template to that person. So I'm not going to put a from email. We're going to call this just the test template to make sure that everything works. And so I'm going to send it to myself. Worry about CC, but this is a test. Make it be a 0 priority item. So the idea is that this template, if we want to send out this particular message, this static message of a test, we'll use template number 1. And so let's see where we are. We have developed the entities necessary. We put in a template, little data. So that's the first part. We've created these entities. The next thing we're going to do is to add a workflow that will take the template and make a Q email out of it. And this is going to be a pretty simple workflow, but we'll do that. So we go into workflows and create our first workflow. And the workflow that we're going to name, first of all, we'll put it into the Q email space. But then we're going to give it a name, which is this, add Q email from template. So and make sure I do it the same way here. So on the input side, we're going to have 2 inputs. One is going to be the template. When you want to add a Q email from template, you'll call it with a template number. And so we're going to pick this as an entity. It's the entity of type Q email template. And then the other thing that we're going to provide is a source, and this is just going to be a text field that comes in. So when we look at the email that gets created from this, we can see where it came from. And then on the output side, we're going to let them, I'll say in advance, we're going to provide the email ID that gets created. And we'll have to set this value before we get done, but we're going to just send back the token email ID. So we need to make sure we create that in our process. And the process is really quite simple. We're going to add a email. So we're going to create a new queue email record, put it in the queue, and I'm going to provide a title for this just to let us know what we're doing. We're going to create the new queue email from the specified template, and then we're going to fill in the blanks for all these fields. So the source of this thing is going to be the source field that came in from our input, and we're going to provide a value default. If nothing gets provided, then it's going to have the word default there. The status is going to be pending. This means that the email is waiting to be sent. It's in the queue and waiting to be sent. The error information is not going to be provided in the spot, so it's going to be empty. But then the from email is going to come from our template, our input from the template, and all the fields from the template is going to be available. So we can just say we want the from email, and then in the same way, we want the template's to email to go there. And it's easy to copy and paste, right? It's harder to type it, but hopefully I've makes sense where these are coming from and speed us along through the process. So the subject goes to the subject, and the body goes to the body, and the priority is going to come from the template as well. So this action here is going to create that, and then the email ID is what's going to get created back. This create action will send us a record ID. That's the output token, and we're going to pass it on to our output, so the output will know about it. And so then from there, we'll just end this. So that's all there is to this. We can save and test it and say that we want to test it with template 1, and the source is, we'll test and we'll run it. We get an output email ID. And so let's see what we've gotten. We had our original email template that was created. And now we can go to the email itself, the queue that's going to go out. And let's take a look at it. And so now we see that we have a new email with the ID that it gave us, number 1, manual test, and then all the fields just get copied to it. So we've demonstrated the first pattern that we're creating emails from templates. And so when you want to manage what your emails say, you can go to that template table and manage it there. And then this is now a queue, a list of things that need to happen. And so we can work through the queue to send emails from here in that centralized place. So we have created the workflow where we've added the queue email from the template. So now we need some automation to actually do the work of sending. And so I'm going to create a automation called send pending queue emails. Again, I'm going to have this up on the other screen so that I can work through it pretty quickly. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to I'm sorry, that's the workflow. We're going to create an automation to do that. So this is a new job, and the new job we're going to do is say send the pending emails. We always want to pick a context portal, and we're thinking real strongly of making this be a requirement going forward, that there is a context portal. But this is, we're saying what portal is this working on? It's the current one. And then for the context user, we need a user that has the rights to do all this. I'm just going to say myself, this is a whole security topic, and we can dig into that later. I'm going to turn on the debug mode just in case we want to take a look at what's going on. At this point, I'm not going to put in any kind of trigger. This is only going to fire manually just so we can keep it under control while we're working and learning, developing. So the first action that we want to do is about this, in our entities, we want to read all queue emails. So this is, we're going to get everything that's waiting to be sent. And so we're going to get that out of the queue emails thing. So this is, I'm just going to add some descriptions. We're going to want to read all that are pending. And so we're going to accomplish that by adding a where clause saying the status is this word pending. Now, again, I used a text value. So we're looking for text. If we had a more complex setup, perhaps we'd be looking for a status value of integer or whatever. But and then I am going to look for 5 of them. You could do them in any number of batches you want, but I'm going to pull them off 5 at a time. And I'm also going to add an order by clause. The idea here is that the highest priority items are going to get picked out of the queue first. So priority is descending. And then the output token that we're going to create is the list of, it's a pending items. All these are going to be put into the pending entity read. So that gets us all of the emails that are pending. And the next thing we want to do is turn that into a list so that we can work with it and iterate through it. So I am going to add a, in our entities section, we're going, our lists and objects section, we would just move things around here. We're going to create a list from JSON. And the JSON we're going to use is the pending list that was just, the pending that was created above. Again, with the output of this is a token called pending, and it tells us that we can use the syntax of whatever the name is, JSON. And if anyone from the development team is watching, we need to rename this text there. So we're going to, the input to this is going to be the pending JSON, and the output, we're going to call it pending list. So this pending list is going to contain a list of the 5 most important items that need to go out. I like to typically put the some of the output things that I do as part of the description, so it's easy to see where a pending list gets created. So we're creating the pending list from the JSON. And finally, we're going to want to iterate through that. So we're going to do that with an execute actions for each list entry. So we're going to go through the list. The list that we're going to go through is the pending list. Here we give it the name of the list. It's asking for the name, so not the value of it. So we do it without brackets. And the thing that we're going to be doing is send each pending list item. We're going to send it out. So we're going to go through the pending list. And so here are all the actions that get done with that. And it's they're not too difficult. But what we're going to want to do is send an email. But before we even do that, I want to prevent, I'm going to update the status to say what's going on with this particular item. So I am going to partially update the queue email with a status of sending. Now, the one that I want to do is from this pending list. So it's pending. Again, we're looping through pending lists, so we have access to all the different things that are in, all the different properties that are in that. So I want to update the pending list ID and say the status is sending. And so we're partially updating queue email to document along the way. So that's the first thing we're going to do, make sure that it's that the status goes from pending to sending. That way it's going to try it one time, and there's no way that it'll ever try it again unless it gets flipped back to pending. The next thing we're going to do, finally, we're going to get around to doing the thing that we wanted to do all along, which is sending the email. So we say send email, and so we'll send, and who are we going to send it to? Well, all those fields are in pending list, so we're going to send it from pending list, the from email. We're going to send it to the to email. If we were more advanced, we could have got a reply to email address in there, but we chose not to. So we're going to do CC to the whoever's the CC, and blind carbon copy to the BCC. The subject is going to be whatever the subject is from the email. And then we're just assuming these are going to be in the HTML format. We could get more advanced with that, but and then what we're going to do is send the pending list body. So so this one generic email sender is taking it from the queue email and putting all those fields into the email, and it'll do the sending that it needs to do. We also are not dealing with attachments at this point. So we've done our two actions. We're updating it to a status of sending, then we're going to send the email, and then assuming that there's no error, we're going to say that it's sent. And so I'm going to just clone this action and say that it's sent. If no errors happen, then this same item is going to get updated to sent. And finally, we're going to deal with an error condition, and this is also going to be a partially update thing. So I'm going to just copy this so that I can paste it right in here, because the only thing I want to do on error is record the error against the email that was going to go. So I'm going to import that partially update, and this is going to be to status error. So the error becomes, excuse me, the status becomes error. And we're also going to set the error info to be the exception message. Now let's see, on error, these are all the things that are available to us when an error occurs. So whatever the error is, we're going to push it back onto the email so that somebody can debug and figure out what happened. And let's see, that's it. So backing up and looking at that a little bit, I'm just going to say what we did. So we're reading all the emails that are pending, we're creating the pending list, and then we're looping through the list to do the work. We're going to change the status to sending. We'll actually send it. We're going to change the status back to sent once it goes. And if an error happens, we're going to record what the error is. So that's our work. And so we will save this piece of automation. So taking a look at what we have in our emails, right now we have one that's in the pending status. And so if we were to manually run this job, with any luck at all, it will send it to us. And so now if we go back and refresh the screen, we can see that this sent. So it didn't have any errors, and it was sent. And this was, if we look at my email here, so we have a test email. So it came from, we used the default email address, so it came from this admin, but we have the subject and the body, and did the twos. All right, so we have accomplished the first part of what we're trying to do, and we did all that in 20 minutes, so that's not too bad. So we have entities, we have a template and a queue email. So all these emails are in a queue. we've made a workflow that makes it easy to consume that. And then we have an automation ready to go that's we'll send them. Let's edit this automation, and we'll add a trigger for it. And in this case, I'm going to do a time trigger. So we'll do a repeat on interval trigger, and I'm just going to make it be every 5 seconds. Now, this might be a little bit excessive for your environment. Might be seconds. So this, but for what we're going to do today, it's going to try to send up to 5 emails, but it's going to do it every 5 seconds. And so hopefully when we get into doing more emails, this will happen very quickly. We don't want it to, we'll skip it if it's already running. And if it misfires, we'll do nothing. So at the most, it's going to run every 5 seconds. And so we'll save this, and now we can watch it, and we can see that it's going to run every 5 seconds. So if there are any emails to go, it'll be, they'll go out immediately. So let's play with this a little bit. If we were to, and this would, just going to make some, kind of manually make some mistakes so we can see what will happen. If we set this to pending, so now that automation is going to pick it up, and we put in a bad email address, let's say it's not in the format of an email, it's still going to try and send it. And so when we do that, that automation in the background runs every 5 seconds. Hopefully it'll pick it up and do it. And now I'm going to refresh the screen and see what happened. And so we can see our error logic worked. And we get error information, failed to parse the email address, bad. So the error part of what we did works, and so that's useful. So now thinking again about this queue design pattern, all your emails are routed into the central place. You can either manually look for errors or set up an automation job to notify you that there are errors. But now you could come back in here and figure out on a manual basis, for example, what you want to do when there's an error. Oh, we tried to send this this email to a person, and we've got a bad email address. Well, who is that? Oh, we know who that is. We can fix the email address and send it again. So we can flip it back to pending and put in some email address. And you could modify anything else that you wanted as well, but we'll update that, and then the emailer will automatically do that. So we've achieved one of our benefits. We have this automatic thing that's going on to do that. And so now when we refresh, we can see that the email got sent. Probably should clear out the error information when that thing goes. So that's one I hadn't considered. That's an easy one to do when we're resending something. So in our execute actions, when we set something to sending, we'll also set it to the error info, set it to blank, so that if the old errors will not be put forward. So cool. All right. So let's see where we are. We've accomplished this much. So let's see what else we can get done. Taking this pattern to the next level, being able to substitute data into this with the templates using tokens is really quite easy, and shows off the power of workflows really well. So I mentioned earlier that I had already created some things. So I just created a couple of entities, one that is for clients. And so we'll add a couple of clients here. I'm actually going to call it client A. And on the email address, I'm going to use a Google trick. So still go to my email address, but we can see it's coming from a different place. Actually was addressed to a different alias. So that's client A. And we'll also add a client B. With a different email address. So we have a couple of clients, and then again, a very simple invoices section. And so the idea here is we're going to send an invoice to a client and we're going to fill in all the blanks. So the client will pick for this invoices client A, and this is going to be services, and we'll pick a number, $400, and maybe we're going to sell client B some products. Again, this is hyper simple, but $10,000 worth of products. So if we wanted to send invoices to this, to send out all of our unsent invoices. I mean, again, this could be far more complex. These should have statuses and things like that. But what we generate invoices and we want to send them, so we would call a workflow that would send them all to a common queue. And so now we have some data. So we'll send. We will trigger these to send, and so that's our objective. So we've got these already created records and we've entities, and we've added a couple of test records just so we can see it work. We're going to add a new template that we will use to that will have some tokens in it. So we go back and look at our templates. This is going to be our invoice template, and so get there where I can do some copy and pasting again. And so, again, I'm going to leave the from email alone, but we're going to send it to a token called client email. And we could use the CC and the BCC, but we're not at this point. And the subject is going to be this more personalized subject. So we're going to take the invoice ID and put it in the subject, and then we're also going to put the client name in the subject. So we're going to have to figure out a workflow that expands all this stuff. And the body is going to be something like this: your invoice number, whatever, for for services or products in the amount of is now due. So that's our thing. And we want invoices to go out right away because we want people to pay us, so we'll give it a high priority. That way, if there are 1,000 other zero priority emails sitting there, this is going to jump to the top of the list and not wait to the bottom. So this gives us our template of what we want to send. If we can just have a workflow that says send invoice, send template to somebody, and here's where the data is coming from, that does this replacement, we can use the same pattern. So it's just a different workflow that's going to get this to happen for us. And so let's create that workflow. It's not too much different from the one we already did, but so we can actually copy this, edit, automation workflow. And so we're going to duplicate this workflow. So it gives us a starting spot, and then we'll make some changes to it. So we'll edit it. And the first thing that we want to do is change the name. I'm going to change it to, it's the same name, but I'm going to say for an invoice. And if I had the time, I'd fill in a nice description. So we're still going to, at the end of the day, we're going to create this queue email, but I'm going to make some space to do some other things first. And we'll also talk about what our inputs are going to be. On our inputs, we still need a template. We still need a source, but we're going to need to pass an invoice into it. The invoice is also going to get us to the client, so we don't have to pass in the client. And this is going to be an entity of type invoice. And then our outputs are not going to change. We're still just, the result is going to be an email ID. So the process is where we need to make some changes. So the first thing that we need to do, because we only get an invoice and we don't get the client, we need to go out and get the client. So we are going to do a read client in action. This will bring it in for us. And so the one that we want, the record that we want, is the invoice. That's the property that's on the invoice that points to the client ID. So that's the record ID that we want. And then we're going to output this to client. Now this is very important. This map needs to match up with the tokens that we used in the template, or this defines what tokens are going to be available in that from that QEmail template. And so that gets us our client information. And then the next thing that we need to do, before we were just passing the template values directly into the email, but now we need to do a little stuff. We need to do some substitution first. So we are going to do some work with tokens. So we want to create or update a token. And what we're doing is we're creating tokens that are going for the email that have some replaced values. So we're going to add a few of these here, and I'm just going to get ahead and add several. And the tokens that we're going to create, we're just going to create one that is called the from email. And the value it's going to get is the one that came in from the template. But by saying that we want to do a couple of recursions, first, this is going to get the value that from our temp, and actually this is probably going to make more sense when we, let's do another one here. We'll do the subject, and it's coming from the template subject. So when we look at our templates, the subject says invoice whatever for client whatever. So when we do this substitution, first the subject is going to have the value of that, the value from the template. And then because we're recurring 2 times, it's going to do it again and actually evaluate those tokens. So if the invoice ID or client name tokens exist, which we've read the client ID and the invoice ID gets passed in, it's going to do the substitution. So now I'm going to work through and do this for all of our fields so that we have happening. Highly recommend the copy and paste method of coding. It's a lot easier than actually thinking it through. BCC and body. So we got from subject to CCBC. I think that's all of them. So now the last thing we need to do is to change the source of these email templates. Instead of coming from the template, we're now just going to come from these new ones that we've created. And so from email is a different thing. It was just that we just created. Same way with all of these. So we created in the previous step, and so now they're going to be available. The priority we're not doing any substitution on, so it's coming in. We still get that from the template. The source is still coming in from an input. We're still choosing pending, and we're still creating an email ID. So these are the changes that are necessary to make that happen. And so now we're at a spot where we can save and test this. So what template are we going to use? We're going to use template number 2, the invoice template. So we'll fill that in. This is going to be an invoice test. It doesn't matter what we call it, but it's going to end up on the email. And the invoice that we want to do, let's do one to client B for products. So that's invoice number 2. And so we'll pass that along and we'll run it. It tells us a created email number 2. So if we were to go look in our emails, and we can find email number 2, which has already been sent, it has substituted the token. So we have, it's going to this Dale.Warner plus client B, invoice 2 for client B, your invoice for products in the amount of. And so just for fun, let's go back and take a look at invoice, and here it is. It's sent an email. So that's the pattern, and so we've worked through. You can substitute values into tokens, and it's incredibly easy with the create update token and the way that information is passed into workflows. And so we now have templates that can use tokens, and it could actually use anything from the template, anything from the client, anything from the invoice. It's really quite cool. So now I promised in the front what, kind of talking bigger picture, what can you do with queues? So we've talked excessively about, exclusively so far, about sending emails, and I think it's a really good pattern to implement. Put all your emails into the same place, you get a lot of benefits, and you have some error handling built in, and you don't have to do that error handling or throughout your application. It can all be centralized. But what else could you do? If you have some job that's time intensive and you want to single thread that, for example, somebody goes to your website and they sign up for a product brochure that you're going to build a 30-page PDF from and personalize it. From the time that they hit send, if you were to do all that work in one place within your application at the save button, then they would either have to sit there through it, or you could use something like a run async to do that so that they don't have to sit through it. But if you put it in a queue to work on, then if you have hundreds of people submitting them all at once, let's say because you ran a commercial and you had a large number of respondents all at once, by throwing them into a queue, you're not going to overwhelm your site. It's going to start working on them one at a time in the priority that you gave it. And so it might take 5 or 10 minutes for that last one to be created, but it doesn't overwhelm your server. It's going to happen. It'll be single threaded and just work its way through them. We've kind of another benefit, another thing that you can do with this is you queue things from multiple sources, so you're funneling them all together, and it becomes a normalized place to do the work. One of the initiatives that Radu is working on is aggregating all of our admin logs from our many internal websites and bringing them all in together in one place so that they can be scored and processed. So a lot of data there. Once we bring it all in, we want to be able to process it, but again, not overwhelm our site. So putting those things into a queue to be processed makes a lot of sense. If you're dealing with a ton of records, you might be doing a synchronization between two systems and lots of records. So trying to do those in one big process may be a problem, but doing them in batches in a queue lets you get the work done on a priority schedule that you set. So that queue column can be used to get the right things done at the right thing, but you continue to work your way through that. And then again, we've demonstrated that when errors happen, you can record them and have something to go back and look at. So instead of having one big complex process that you're trying to debug, you can debug individual chunks of work that are in the queue. Okay, so for some reason, nobody has asked me any questions, but thank you all for attending through that. And we've run up against our hour. I hope you find that valuable and useful in your applications. Bogdan, do you want to close us out?
Yes. Yes, I think it was interesting, and it's so common to the point that Dale and I were even discussing this should be more built-in things like that inside the product. But of course, building it, as you can see, it's a no-brainer, and of course, it's very personalized to the problem that you are solving and the flavor that you are preferring. So there's always a trade-off. but quite useful trick to have in the toolbox for an array of problems. So thanks a lot, Dale, for putting this in place for us. And thanks everyone for being here. See you again next week, same time.